Titans are going first here in the AFC South. Of course, they kicked it off with Cam Ward at the top, the number 1 overall pick. Cam Ward from Miami, the quarterback. In the second round, they go Oluwafemi Oladejo. I had it ready, and then I screwed it up. Oladejo from UCLA, the edge rusher. The Titans made some trades here. Remember, they didn't have a pick until the third round, so they did maneuver the draft board a little bit to make sure that they had second and third round picks here. Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, the safety, was their third round pick. Chimera Dike, wide receiver out of Florida, was their first fourth rounder, the first pick of round 4. They had 2 more fourths. Gunnar Helm, the tight end out of Texas. Elic Ayomanor, the wide receiver out of Stanford. And then 5th rounder Jackson Slater, guard from Sacramento State, and a couple other 6th rounders here. So your thoughts on this? A lot of people really liked the Titans draft. And I know when you're evaluating drafts, how much credit do you give them for just doing the expected thing? Whether you care or not, it's still a pretty good group of players here for the Titans, for Mike Bergonzi in his first draft.
Yeah. I'm always confused by the people that give incredible draft grades for a team that's picking number 1 overall, and they take the consensus number 1 overall pick. Like it's almost like a given starter to me. Like it's just already in the equation. It's already on your team. We've known for a long time now that Cam Ward was going to be the number 1 overall pick. Now they still have to do it. They still have to turn in the card, etc. But I find it hard to give credit for that. It's like, it's just the sort of, it's almost like the default starting point of the draft was number 2 overall, not number 1 overall. We just basically penciled Cam Ward onto the team already. So I find it a little strange to be like, that's an incredible draft haul. It's like, yeah, but he's already been on the team for weeks now.
Yeah. So again, if you're grading process, it might change things. If you're grading, hey, here's what they brought in. But let's talk about Cam Ward, because maybe that guy got overshadowed a little bit by the other quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, who went in the 5th round. But Cam Ward, why did he go number 1 overall? A fascinating ascent here from Incarnate Word a couple years ago to Washington State to Miami. I remember watching him before the season and just putting out onto Twitter and into the ether there that this could be the guy that breaks out this season. This could be the guy that has that massive, I called it just Heisman level breakout, but all the tools to have the type of season that he had at Miami. And he did. And he elevated that team. You could see it from week 1 against Florida, the arm talent, his ability to make plays inside and outside of structure, his ability to get the ball down the field. I think he was the clear number 1 quarterback in this draft. And I think the Titans, there were some other options here for the Titans. I'm sure Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter were intriguing, especially with a first-time GM and overhauled front office. I'm sure they thought about trying to get the haul that the Bears got a couple years ago when they traded out of the Bryce Young spot. And that has set the Bears up with a better roster. I'm sure they thought about it, but they obviously liked Cam Ward enough to just make the pick.
Yeah, in a funny way, the Titans draft and Cam Ward have been not just a little overshadowed, but completely overshadowed in the entire draft process. And actually, I think to a large degree, Cam Ward has kind of gotten by without the nitpicking that usually takes place for top quarterback prospects. Like, he was such a sort of consensus number one ranked quarterback in this draft. And all the attention went towards the reasons the other guys didn't stack up, right? So why Shedeur Sanders didn't belong in the conversation and was going to slide. And then obviously his draft weekend fall, but why Tyler Shook didn't belong in that conversation, why Jackson Dart shouldn't be a 1st round pick, why, Jalen Milroe didn't belong there. And because everything was sort of focused on why all the other guys weren't Cam Ward never got the kind of real, like, critical analysis, I think, that a lot of other top quarterback picks get. And even a year ago, right? Even Caleb Williams, who was seen as the consensus number 1 guy, you did start to get but what about this for Caleb Williams? And, are we sure? And would we go Drake May? Would we go Jaden Daniels? Cam Ward has just been sort of pillar to post. Well, he's the number 1 guy now. He's the guy that's easiest to make the case for. And while I do think it's right that he was the number one overall pick and the number 1 quarterback in this draft, I do feel like his flaws have been kind of papered over, or at least glossed over and ignored a bit, because all the critical focus has been on the other quarterback. So let's start with the good. He's the easiest of all these top quarterbacks to paint the optimistic picture for, right? He's got the easiest physical tools to align yourself with. 6'2", 223 pounds was his official measurements. Easy velocity with his arm. Like he can just fire a frozen rope from pretty much any arm angle, from pretty much any foot platform as well. He doesn't need his feet underneath him to do all that. He's athletic. He's not, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels level of athletic, but he's functionally athletic. He can, extend plays extremely well in the pocket. He can buy time running around in the backfield. I view it as somewhere in the kind of prime Russell Wilson era of athleticism, like something like that. So all of that together, and he makes a lot of big plays down the field with that arm, with that athleticism. So you put all that together, it's a very easy picture to see, right? This is why he's going to be good. And, the college production paints a very flattering picture as well. Career 158 touchdowns, 37 interceptions. So a lot of people like to use, touchdown to interception ratio as a kind of broad strokes idea of production and decision making. And that's been very good basically throughout his college career. And this most recent season, a spectacular performance with a 92.9 PFF grade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the easiest kind of guy to align yourself behind. But one thing that didn't come up that much, he has never had a single season where his turnover-worthy play rate has been below 3.3%. That's pretty high, right?
Yep.
And compare
Especially
it to a guy like Shedeur Sanders,
it's high in the NFL. It's high in the NFL. It's especially high in college.
Right. And you compare that to a guy like Shedeur Sanders, whose rate is basically half that. And we brought this up when we talked about Cam Ward and the quarterback prospect or the quarterback ranking show. He is a big game hunter, stylistically. Like he wants to make the special, explosive, big play down the field to the exclusion of, taking the profit a lot of the times. Like he will pass up open underneath throws to go big game hunting and go trying to find a big one. And that gets him into trouble sometimes. And then the other thing that gets him into trouble is being on that Josh Allen to Will Levis spectrum of crazy, right? It's a very fine line between lunatic and genius. And he toes that line sometimes. And a lot of the times he comes down on the right side of it, right? It's like, great, that's an amazing play. That's a playmaker. But it's like a fraction the other way, and it's a lunatic play. And that's where the Will Levis side comes down. So I think he's a really interesting quarterback prospect. I think he does belong number one. I think he's a good prospect. I think he belongs in the group from a year ago. Maybe not the Caleb Williams level, but like the second tier of that top six where we were talking Bo Nix, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy. I think he belongs in that group of quarterbacks. But I do think that there's a lot more risk attached to Cam Ward than we've heard about given this whole process.
Yeah, but to repeat what I've said a lot throughout the process here, there might be some individual plays that remind Titans fans of what Will Levis did, but I think the reason for them is different, right? Will Levis, maybe in the heat of the moment, makes some panic plays that just aren't great. And Cam Ward, as you mentioned, it's like this fine line between genius and, wild and crazy. And so to make the other plays, to make the scramble to his left against Louisville and throw a frozen rope 35 yards down the field for a touchdown, and to do something similar against Florida, you might have to deal with a throwback across his body again against Florida or against Cal, the pick six. I mean, they're just bad. Like those remind me of Josh Allen, right? They're just bad decisions. But the credit I always gave Cam Ward is there's maybe one or two in a game and he bounces back from it. He comes back. It doesn't affect him. He doesn't implode. Cal game in particular, they're down 3 scores. He makes the comeback. So I think he elevated Washington State. I think he elevated Miami last year, even though they didn't get into the college football playoff. They ended up tapering off toward the end. I thought they were going to make a run, and Cam Ward was a big part of that. So yeah, there's a boomer bust style to his game. High big time throw, high turnover worthy plays, some running ability, the ability to stretch the field. That all needs to be acknowledged. But he's also the most likely in this draft to become the coveted top 8 to 12 quarterback, we'll say, right? He has the most likely skill set to develop into that. So that's why the Titans make the pick at number 1 overall. And then they did some anything else on Cam before we get through the rest of their draft class. Hey guys, just taking a quick break to tell you, hey, just over 50% of you are still unsubscribed to Check the Mic. It helps the channel. It helps to make sure that you don't miss any of our shows. So if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button right now.
That last point is critical, right? In this world where we're not really shooting for starter anymore, right? We are shooting for a guy that can be a top 8 quarterback that can go toe to toe with the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, the Joe Burrows of the world in the postseason, Lamar Jackson, and come out on top, right? You need a special skill set for that. Cam Ward is the easiest to envision a world where that comes true because he's got the arm, he's got the athleticism, he's got the big playability. You just need to tidy up the negative plays and the bad plays. And as much as, I mean, that's sometimes that's a pipe dream. Like sometimes you can't tidy those up and those are just part of the dude. It's just easier to imagine that world than it is for, let's say, a Shedeur Sanders where he doesn't have the special physical traits. And you're like, well, so he now needs to become Joe Burrow, right? He now needs to become like an absolutely savant decision maker because he doesn't have an insane arm and insane athleticism. It's just much easier to imagine the first guy than the second guy. So that in a nutshell is why Cam Ward was almost pillar to post the number one guy in this prospect or in this draft. Once people started to dive into it, it's like this guy could become one of those top 10 quarterbacks if we tidy up the negatives.
So let's go through the rest of the offense right now and what they have and what they added in this draft. I'm not going to go as far as maybe what RG3 put out there, that the Titans have the, quote, perfect offense around Cam Ward. I think he had some sort of crazy take with, the Dan Moore edition and the receivers that they added. It's perfect. Tyler Lockett. But they've done some work on this offense, a bad offensive line for multiple years. They do bring in Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle, move J.C. Latham over to the right side. Kevin Zeitler comes in at right guard. They are in creep back toward average territory. Peter Skoronski heading into year 3. I think they've got the pieces to have a mid-level offensive line, maybe even better, right? If Latham, there's a step forward for a Latham in year 2 and Skoronski in year 3 and the whole thing. So I think they're in a better spot there. The receivers that they've added, Calvin Ridley is technically the one here. I've always liked Ridley as a 2. I don't think that goes well when Ridley's the top guy, but they brought in Tyler Lockett on the 1-year free agent deal as just another, just dependable, getting older veteran presence. But the 2 draft picks, Chimera Dike runs 4.3, legitimate deep threat for Florida. We kept pairing Cam Ward with a guy like Jalen Knoll, similar idea, but Dike could be the guy who is the beneficiary of Cam Ward's 60-yard bombs down the field. And then Elic Ayomanor, the receiver from Stanford, getting him in the 5th. He's the one guy that, interestingly enough, Travis Hunter being in the AFC South, when you go back and you say Travis Hunter's a great corner, but there was this one game, it was Ayomanor from Stanford who absolutely wrecked him for about 190 yards. It was only one game, but it is interesting. They're both in the same division. And Ayomanor, I didn't like him in the 2nd or 3rd where people were talking about him, but I love him in the 5th because as a big guy that moves well, I thought just needed to polish up some general receiving skills. And I love that as a 5th rounder.
Yeah, Dinkleberg, whatever that guy's name is, in the chat with a super chat asking where would Ward rank in last year's quarterback class and why. I think, again, in that second tier, I probably would have ranked him 5th in last year's class, so behind McCarthy, but ahead of Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. Off the top of my head, though, it's difficult to do it, a year removed or a year afterwards. Because of the reasons we said, right? Like he's got the physical tools to be in that conversation, but he makes more big mistakes than some of those other guys as well. And I don't think his overall level of performance has been as good as the top tier guys. So I think I'd have had him 5th in that whole group of 7 guys.
If I could get into my own headspace of last year thinking about the prospects, I still would have, I probably would have had Caleb Williams, then Drake May, then Jaden Daniels. I definitely would have liked May over Daniels. So I'm not going to change that history. I think I would have had Cam Ward next, though. I think I would have said there's too many questions with J.J. McCarthy carrying an offense. I'm going to go Cam Ward here. I didn't love Bo Nix. I thought he was the clear 6. And Michael Penix Jr., his big question marks were the knee injuries and everything. So if you talk about questions, it'd be Cam Ward's consistency versus J.J. McCarthy's volume versus Michael. Yeah, so I would have said 4th for last year. Anyway, thoughts on those receivers, then we'll get into the rest of the draft here with the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you paint yourself into a picture of being over your head over heels in love with this receiving core. Like Calvin Ridley is a pretty clear sort of number 2 wide receiver in most offenses. They still don't really have the number 1 guy. Tyler Lockett looks like he's very much into the decline of his career. If you look, like, the Titans have a history now of like being the last stop for a receiver about to call it a career. You know, Randy Moss, Titans legend, right? That kind of thing. Tyler Lockett could easily be the next one of those guys. Like, I love Tyler Lockett. He's had an incredible career, but he looks like he's pretty close to being done. It's kind of hard to imagine him having a bounce back season in Tennessee with a rookie quarterback at the helm and et cetera. So you're talking Calvin Ridley, who's got a ceiling as a number 2, Tyler Lockett, who's on the way down and is probably a number 3. Then you've got that mix of, well, who's going to step up and be the other guy? Is it going to be Ayomanor right off the bat? Are they going to get something out of Treylon Burks, the former first-round pick? Van Jefferson is there. They've added another couple of rookies, including Cam Ward's favorite college receiver, Xavier Restrepo, as an undrafted free agent who,
like that,
a slot guy only who ran a 4.8, but gets open, makes plays, right? Is a football player despite horrific workout numbers. So, I mean, look, there's some players to throw to, but overall, this looks like a weakness, I think.
Just to touch on the other players here, second rounder, Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA. He was kind of a late riser in this process, was a linebacker at UCLA, late conversion to edge. I think there's, you could see the development in his game. He's got a couple, go-to moves off the edge, and then UCLA still used him as a stand-up linebacker rushing the passer. Did a pretty nice job at the Senior Bowl. I didn't love him as just a pure edge when there's other edge rushers in this class, but if you're watching on YouTube, you could see the stand-up snap here against a center where I think you can move him around and create some mismatches up front. They needed any kind of juice off the edge. I don't know if he's polished enough right now. It might take another year or two for him. And then I really liked Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State. If he didn't get hurt out in the second game last year, we're talking about him as one of the best safeties in this draft. Sure tackler, 98th percentile missed tackle rate on the positive end. Low, as far as lowest missed tackle rate in this in the last 10 years among safeties. So fantastic tackler, short area range, short area coverage player. He's pretty athletic. Don't like him in zone better than man, but I think Winston's a good player in the third round as well. So between those two, DK, Ayomanor, I think they have some players to contribute here.
Yeah, and remember, they sort of traded down from the top of the second round where they could have been in that market of the guys that slipped out of day one. They traded a bit down, and they draft Oladejo, who's a really interesting player. Like, I do think maybe it's a tiny reach where they got him, but I kind of think that's the right area given the physical tools that he's bringing to the table. He's incredibly raw and inexperienced, but he's barely played the position. He kind of converted to being a full-time edge like a month into the 2024 season, effectively, was when he first started playing like all the time as an edge rusher. He's 6'3", 261, and the tools are there. Like, even just from those Senior Bowl clips, you could see the physical traits that he's bringing to the table. So you would expect him to have like inconsistent hands, inconsistent moves. The timing isn't really there. Like, he's extremely raw, but you can see the upside. I mean, we've been like, Jalen Walker went in the middle of the first round with a similar sort of lack of experience. I think he's further along in terms of just pass rush ability right now, but he's also smaller. I mean, people are complaining about Jalen Walker only being 6'2", 245, 248. Like, Oladejo is bringing 15 more pounds to the table. He's a bit longer, a bit taller. I like him as a mid-second round, not gamble, as an upside play. Like, I think he's exactly the type of raw prospect that could become a day one talent, but because of the question marks, the lack of experience, et cetera, he's available midway through the second round.
Yeah, you mentioned the Titans trading down from the top of the second. They had the 34th pick in the draft, I believe, or 35th pick in the draft. They end up picking 52nd. They pick up the extra pick at 82. That's where they got Winston, because they were going to go pick 35 and then 103. So they got the extra selection in there, which I thought was a good move. I thought they were a candidate for that because they were so thin with top 100 pick. So I thought it was a good move for them to add some of that volume. We know it all.
It's worth sort of, just taking a beat to say, well, what was available at that spot, right? So if they were going edge rusher with their next pick and they'd stayed at 35, 34, wherever they were picking, Donovan Ezeraku was on the board at that point. He slipped into the second round. So that's part of this dynamic, right? That's the calculus. Would you rather have Ezeraku and not pick up an extra pick, or would you rather trade back, pass up on Ezeraku, get Oladejo instead, and also extra draft pick? So like Scorton as well was in the similar, though I think Scorton was on the board when they picked. No, he went one pick ahead of Oladejo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say the simple calculus would be Oladejo and Kevin Winston, that's a pick they got from Seattle in that trade, versus, say, Ezeraku, if you were going to go edge. Obviously, there's other players to pick there too, but one Ezeraku versus Oladejo plus Winston. On paper, that looks like, all right, I mean, I love Ezeraku, but 2 for the price of 1. Over time, I think wins out, and I think it was a good move for Tennessee.
So, yeah, the 3 edge rushers that effectively went off the board between when they would have picked and when they did pick with the extra draft pick are Ezeraku, Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, and then who was the third? JTT from Ohio State. Yeah. So those 3 were the players they effectively passed up in order to pick up an extra draft pick and then draft Oladejo.
All right, as we know, we'll move on in a second here. We know it all comes down to Cam Ward and his development, but I think they did a nice job. Mike Bergonzi in his first official draft here, doing a nice job in a draft where he's given pick 1, pick 35, and then nothing else until 103.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.